Hello, everyone. Good evening, Bengaluru. Big round of applause for Shubha Mudgal ji. On behalf of the team of the Bengaluru Poetry Festival, we'd like to thank Shubha ji for gracing this occasion. We are very lucky to have her. We start off the session. Humra ji and me will be talking to Shubha ji about her music, her background. But many of you who know Shubha ji mostly for her music, her classical music, her gaiki, her various compositions, might not know that a lot of this has been influenced by poetry, and hence Bengaluru Poetry Festival. We'd like to begin by, Humra ji will be asking, we'll go back and forth basically. Humra ji will be, Humra ji will be talking about her background, and I'll be speaking on the poetic front. So let's begin. Please bear with us.
Hello, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah. So a big welcome to you, Shubha and Maitreyee. I'm Humra, and there's so much to Shubha that I think she needs no introduction. She's a singer, she's an artist, she's a short story writer and a composer. So, but what I'm curious about, that this huge, long journey that you are going through, or you actually reached that level, so there has to be a background. Obviously, huge journey, you're living life at your own terms, you've made a mark, you're respected all over internationally, also here, of course, in the country and internationally. So there has to be a background. So I'm very curious to know about your childhood, adulthood, and the journeys you've taken and the personal decisions you've taken in your life. So we start with your childhood. Go back to Allahabad, I think.
Namaskar to all of you, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to be here. By no stretch of imagination would I qualify as a poet. So it's really a very special honor for me to be part of this festival. Humra ji, you asked about my childhood. Usually, traditional musicians in India belong to Khandani families of musicians. My family is not one of musicians. I am a first generation musician. And my parents, though they were quite obsessed with music and the arts, they had learned music also to some extent, but they were not musicians. And they really encouraged me and my only other sibling, my sister, to really engage with the arts in as fulsome and wholesome a way as possible. And they gave us many, many opportunities, not just to learn music or dance or to participate in school level, college level theater, etc. But somehow we were given, I don't know how they managed that, but they gave us the definite idea that to have the gift of the arts in your life is a very big gift. And they were extremely encouraging. I don't remember a single year when my mother said to me that, now you're appearing for the board exams, out with all the music lessons, concentrate on your studies. In fact, we were encouraged to make that study of music part of our daily lives. So if you're eating every day, if you're going to school every day, how can it be possible that you miss your music lesson? And of course, we were, like all children, we were bad kids also. And we would have our little, headaches and tummy aches and excuses for not wanting to continue with one or the other music lesson. But really speaking, I think what I really look back and I'm very grateful to my parents for was the fact that they really gave us this open canvas, and said, look, this is something which will enrich your life. And that's why we were able to study music. I was able to get talim from some of the major gurus. My mother had a really big role to play in this, and I remember when I graduated from Allahabad University and was running around trying to get admission for my postgraduate course, my mother said, what are you running around for? It's quite obvious to me that you are really connected with music. This is what really gives you the greatest happiness. And I think you've done enough as an amateur. Now you need to make a full-time commitment to music. Whether you want to do that or not is up to you. I will not help you make the decision. You make it on your own. I'm not so sure that my father was initially happy with this offer, but I think finally they decided that it would be better for me to take that decision. Thereafter, my mother really encouraged me. She did not say, not once did she say that I had a gift. She just said, this is what you love, so you better do this as much as possible. And there were no expectations of becoming either a radio artist, which at that time used to be a big thing, or to be on stage. But it was just that the study of music needs to be very serious, disciplined. You have to be committed to it, and you need to see whether you want to make that commitment or not. Because it's not going to be easy, like any study. I'm not going to say that she said music is more difficult than anything else. She just said any commitment that you make needs a certain willingness to be committed to it. So do so at your own peril. And my parents really and my family really supported me, and that's why I was able to study music and continue to study it.
But this was all in Allahabad.
Ji, bilkul.
And this is rare for middle class family in Uttar Pradesh, that time. Little rare sort of thing to take place in Uttar Pradesh, and that time. This was, you're talking of the 60s.
Yes, many, many years ago, yes, decades ago.
Decades ago, huh.
Yes. Actually, interestingly, I remember, my maternal grandmother was born in 1900. And she was also very, very fond of music and the arts. And in our family albums, I see my Nani ji, in various gardens with a sitar, with a bela bahar. But when she expressed a desire, she told us, when she expressed a desire to study Indian music, her father said it's not possible. At best, I can get a piano teacher to teach you. But this other stuff, you're not going to be able to learn. So this is 1900. Then she has 3 daughters, of whom my mother is the eldest. And she gives her every opportunity to study music and learn dance, sitar, vocal music, whatever. But she still doesn't feel that it's a viable, full-time commitment or a profession. Then along comes my mother, and she calls her 16-year-old daughter and says,
go ahead.
Go ahead if you want to, but at your own peril. I think within the family itself, the changes in perception, in the ability to accept artists, you can see how it was changing.
So when did you come to Delhi?
I came to Delhi in the early 80s because, again, my mother felt that in Allahabad, I was the sort of very well-loved child of 2 teachers in the university whom everyone knew. Everybody had either dawdled me on their knee or had seen me, attended my first birthday party. And she said, you will be a frog in the well. Because nobody is going to tell you, listen, you sound horrible. So other than your guru, nobody will say that. So you had better leave. And you need to see where you stand among other young people who are making similar decisions, both from khandans of musicians as well as from non-khandani backgrounds. So you need to leave, and then at that point of time, the discussion was about Mumbai, about Kolkata, and about Delhi. And because I was from North India, Hindi speaking, so it was felt that the shock might be a little less for me if I went to Delhi. And that's how I moved to Delhi.
So then, how did you move further into music?
I continued to study music, and I also, it was not as if I broke ties from my guru in Allahabad. My guru his name was Pandit Ramashray Jha Ramrang, and he was a very, very well-known scholar musician, and I feel it's necessary to mention him here also, because not only was he a composer of melodies, but he was also what is called a Vagyayakar. So he actually wrote his own lyrics as well. And so he continued to teach me even after I had moved to Delhi. I would ask him for talim, and he would say, okay, I'm free from so-and-so time to so-and-so time. And I would go back to Allahabad and learn from him. But in Delhi, when I reached Delhi, another world opened up for me. And I was able to see and listen to various programs. I mean, I remember seeing the Merce Cunningham Dance Company come there. I remember seeing Pina Bausch Company. I remember listening to many, many classical artists whom I had not had the chance to listen to in Allahabad.
Of course.
And it was a smaller place, resources were few, and so very often we had a certain set of artists who would come, but not
Not
many.
this sort of.
And here I was, all I needed to do was look at the newspaper every day and say, I'm off to so-and-so place to listen to so-and-so. And it was just this wonderful new world opening up to me, some of which was unfamiliar, some of which I didn't really understand. But nevertheless, it was a very exciting point for me as a listener. And I think much of one's learning and understanding also comes from, committed listening. And I remain a committed listener to date.
But tell us some of the hurdles you went through. I mean, it must have been a tough thing also.
This is a very tough question you've asked me,
Okay.
because for any artist, when you say, what are your challenges, the first thing that you want to do is, you get this feeling wells up and you say, I want to share all, But when I look back on hurdles and challenges that other artists have faced in the past, particularly women, I feel the path was much easier for me, primarily because at no point was there ever a moment when I felt that my family is not with me. And that support, I truly, truly value. Otherwise, of course, there are a number of challenges. First of all, there are many artistic challenges. For every artist, it is necessary to examine one's being, one's identity as an artist and say, these are my weaknesses and these are my, my strengths. If you can't say that, you're never going to improve. So, for example, I used to adore Lataji's singing. And I would remember, memorize every song, every khatka, every murki, and try and sing it. And then I realized, what an idiot I am. I can never sound like her, because she's Lata Mangeshkar. I am not, and I'm never going to be. And this idea of accepting that you need to be in your own skin as an artist, not try and put on someone else's skin, however fantastic that may be, and however perfect that may be. I think this is the first challenge that a student of any art would face. I have to understand the limitations of my own voice. Very often people will say, "Awaaz to achhi hai, but high nahi jati hai. It's too low, it's too bass." Now you can either, it's like accepting the fact that I have a round face, I can't make it, an oval one. So,
I know.
These challenges are the major ones. Also knowing that you're really working, you're really studying a form where the great masters have really done a lot. What are you going to do that you can say is new? I think in a sense this acceptance of not saying I am doing something new because somebody somewhere else in the world has already done that. So these are many challenges, working with your voice, working with your ease and intimacy with that form. Some people would say to me, when I started getting a few programs, let's say, like, Navodit Kalakar, there were many programs when I was growing up which were for upcoming artists, and I started getting featured in those. Sometimes male musicians would tell me, "Oh, you're a woman, that's why you're getting the opportunities. And you have a bold voice, you're a pleasant-looking woman, so you will get them." And I would always feel very angry and upset at this assessment of my supposed merit, that this is the only reason why I'm being called. And I would say, well, look at the audience. There are an equal number of women in the audience. And so how come they're not sort of, stalking you and calling you for more opportunities? And so these were many things that you would understand. Asking for certain professional niceties and courtesies, just niceties, not indulgences. So I'm not talking of asking for a stretch limousine to reach the concert. I'm asking for just saying, is there going to be somebody Is there going to be somebody who's going to get me from the hotel to the venue for my concert? Or saying, can I please have this microphone? I don't think these are unreasonable demands, but very often I was told that I was being difficult.
Or just even acceptability, perhaps.
Yes, and how can you as a young woman also, because I'll never be an ustad, remember. And however many vidushis you tack on, it still isn't the same. So among my own contemporaries, it is very often accepted that the males asking for certain special treatment is fine. Women asking, or for example, if I say, you've called me for a concert, are you recording this? Because I haven't given you recording rights, then I'm difficult. So along with my reputation as a singer with a very low-pitched voice, I've also earned the reputation of being a difficult person.
Shubhaji, when we were speaking earlier in the afternoon, you spoke about how, your love for poetry, whether it's bhakti poetry or ritikar, and many of the, poetic expressions in your journey through poetry, you saw a lot of the male, voices expressing emotions, that did not capture the female emotions, and sort of left out the voice of the female. I want you to take us through the journey of your personal love for poetry, which influenced your compositions, as well as delve a little bit into that side where this sort of this wish that you have to speak for many of the female emotions also comes through.
Actually, what I was trying to say was that the lyrics of Hindustani Ragdari bandishes have largely been written by men taking on women's voices. And this is true of a lot of poetry in India, even bhakti poetry, that Kabir is writing to the divine in a feminine voice. So this is very common. I mean, I haven't really heard of bandishes which present a male protagonist's viewpoint. But what I was trying to suggest, and I don't know if I can articulate it properly or not, is that perhaps this is one of the reasons why in a huge, almost inexhaustible repertoire of Ragdari bandishes, you come across an abundance of themes which are related to women. These women are always young, yuvati, beautiful, sundari, bhushan bhushit, adorned with beautiful ornaments. You will also come across women who are goddesses, compassionate, or they can be terrifying when they are not pleased with something. You will come across women with the maternal instinct. So there will be many compositions on Yashoda, for example, and how she plays with the child Krishna. But you will not find almost no references to aging women, even though there is a category called Praudha Naika in the classic division of Naikas. But so I was wondering, how come nobody's written about aging, And I found in the Kramik Pustak Malika series, which is a set of 6 volumes compiled by the pioneer Vishnu Narayan Bhatkhande, there are approximately 1,800 compositions that he had collected, notated, and published, and we all continue to refer to them. I found one single composition in Rag Chayanat, which says, "E joban mora diye jaat daga, काले केस गए घर अपने आई सेत बगा." That's the only composition in Chayanat that I found which talked of aging. Otherwise, by and large, the abundance of women-related themes are only about young, beautiful, ornamented, very attractive women. And perhaps one of the reasons is because many of the Vagyakars were males. Over the years, I've also been looking at compositions that were made by women composers. They are also writing in the same, largely the same format. The only slightly, and these are all very beautiful. I mean, not for a minute am I suggesting that we should reject this entire corpus of beautiful compositions. I'm not saying that they need to be rejected, but I'm wondering why women didn't write differently, why they chose to write on the same themes and in a manner which really, unless somebody tells you that this is the great woman composer or performer who composed it. In fact, very often we have this tradition of a chap or the name of the pen name of the poet or the Vagyakar composer. So Sadarang, Adarang, Ramarang, my own guru, and many others. Amongst women, you don't find that tradition of actually inserting their chap, at least in Hindustani classical music. The only person I know was Gauhar Jan, who very often in her compositions said, you can find in some part of the lyrics, Gauhar kahe, or something like, or she announces that she has composed this. But otherwise, rarely do you find that women composers are even establishing their identities as being the authors, being the poets of these bandishes.
And tell us, Shubha ji, about how poetry has influenced your music.
So, I mean, on the one hand, I'm a student of a form of music called khayal, which says that words, very often the interpretation is that these are not shabd pradhan forms. So they are not steered by the text. And there are also certain forms within this form called khayal, which do away with lyrics, but which do with mnemonic sounds, like tarana, for example. And khayal numa, which is also where you also use mnemonic syllables. But my point is that if you are singing words, how can you forget about them? I mean, of course, you will be attracted by the phonetic quality. So when you have a composition in Malhar which says dhoom dham, when it describes thunder and lightning, you will not say dhoom dham. You may sing it with that kind of robust dhoom dham. You will bring that phonetic quality into the singing and the utterance of that word. But at the same time, I feel I cannot ignore what the song text is saying. A very famous composition which says sukh kar ai piyasang. What does it mean? It means a night spent in pleasure with the beloved. How can you just say that these words make no sense to me and I will slice them up in little bits and I will not really have, I will not refer to them as actually describing an experience. So whether it is bhakti or whether it is an extremely sensual experience or whether it is anger, rutna, manana, I think all of these things you cannot ignore. And I started out, first of all, trying to see, because we do have devices within khayal, where you're supposed to rearrange the text as you elaborate on it. So if you have sukh kar ai, or let's say the very famous Thumri also, which is, Kaun gali gayo sham. So when you sing it, when you elaborate on it, not only do you do a melodic, rhythmic elaboration, but you also juggle the words. Kaun gali gayo kaun gali sham, sham kaun gali gayo, etc., etc. And you try and
Would
make...
you be able to hum that, please?
Yes. Kaun gali gayo sham, sham kaun gali gayo sham, kaun gali gayo sham, kaun gali. I can start changing. Kaun gali kaun gayo sham, kaun gali शाम गयो कौन गली gayo sham. I can start juggling the words around or take only a small fragment from this particular phrase because I want to highlight that. I want to create a sense of space. How do I do that? By stretching out the words. All of these things come into play, and therefore you do need to look at the text very, very carefully and enjoy it, savor it, and only then I feel are you able to communicate first with yourself and then with the audience.
I wanted to ask you that with the conditions today, the whole political atmosphere today, so much violence, killings, and communal sort of surcharge sort of atmosphere, how do you cope as an artist? I mean, has it affected you, all these build-ups?
Well, I have the honor of having a case of sedition filed against me some time back. But you are right that these one cannot live in one's ivory tower.
Exactly.
I am very much a person living in today's world. I cannot not be distressed, not be absolutely in agony at seeing what is happening, whether it is Manipur or whether it is Nu or whether it is any other place. There is no question that you cannot remain calm, unaffected and say, I'm going to lock my doors, put on my tanpuras and forget about the world. But I'm not an activist either. In fact, sometimes I feel I'm cowardly because I can do no more than sort of sometimes be part of a protest, sometimes write an open letter.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, what can I do? And at some points, I feel that, no, this is not I want to do more, and I am a coward for not having done more.
But I've seen you at protest meets.
That's very little. That's the least I can do. As somebody who feels and thinks and lives and breathes in today's world, I must do more.
But do you feel like earlier, decades back with this progressive writers movement, you feel the artists generally, artists from different spheres should get together and voice a very, very strong, what should I say, protest against what's happening? A joint sort of thing.
I think artists are doing that. And some artists are not able to do that also. Some fall in line with whatever is happening. And I don't want to sit on judgment because I feel I am not in their place. How can I decide what they should do? I can also not tell others what I am doing, this is best, do it. But then how am I different from anybody else? So I feel I can only, for example, one of the things that I do, and I never ever try to influence people who are vulnerable compared to me. For example, students who come to me. I cannot tell them to follow a certain path. I can teach them music. I can show them what a beautiful composite tradition it is, how enriched we would be by studying it in its totality, if that's possible. It's very difficult to do that. But more than that, I cannot force them in any way. And I feel that's what I do. There are many artists. There's Javed Saab here who has written the most inspiring poems. There are other, I try to do, when I compose, for example, one of the pieces that I wanted, one of the poems that I read many years ago and I really wanted to sing it. And I did not know because my singing is charged by the grammar and vocabulary of Hindustani classical music. So that's what I need to go back to each time. But I also wanted to sing, let's say, something like Kumar Narayanji's Ayodhya 1992, which is a fascinating poem about what he felt about the entire Babri Masjid episode. And finally I sang it at a concert with permission from his son to do so. And I think that those are the kind of things that currently I feel drawn to doing. How long I'll be able to do them, I don't know, because there could be a passage from Kabir that will offend people today. And so Kabir may be banned also, or if it's politically convenient to not ban him, then only certain parts of Kabir will be left with us. As we know, Kabir, of course, wrote a certain corpus of poetry. We don't know what actually was it. It's the scholars decide that this is real Kabir, this is authentic Kabir, this is what Kabir may have become when other people wrote as Kabir. But I don't know how much of that material will be sung, because finally there's a message there. And if that message is inconvenient for anybody, who knows, you know, I mean, we could see Kabir being banned as well.
Your short stories, your book came out 3 years back?
Earlier, 2017.
6 years back. So they are, I'm sorry I've not been able to read the book, but they are like, focusing on what?
They're about the world of music in India, and it's called Looking for Miss Sargam, Stories of Music and Misadventure. There are 7 stories about various forms of music, including Hindustani classical. But since I've had the opportunity to interact with musicians from various genres, I've also mentioned, I've been an observer of all of this for many decades now. It comes from my having been a fly on the wall when I'm not on stage and quietly listening to various things that go on behind stage, backstage, in the preparation for concerts, the many humiliations, the many challenges that artists face, the many strategies that they come up with, sometimes goofy ones, to really, you know, overcome such challenges and be relevant. But as I said, I'm a good listener, and I carefully listen to not just sounds, but also tones, etc. And I felt the need to share these stories, but of course, I'm no author as such.
So
but
all of you who didn't know about this book that Shubhaji has written about, can please go and check it online, or, you know, buy it at shops maybe. Yeah, you have Shubhaji, you might even ask her to sign it if she so obliges. So Shubhaji, you have been inspired by Braj Bhasha poet Devdutt. Could you please tell us a little bit about the inspiration from that poetry and how it reflects in your compositions? And maybe sing one line, please.
So actually, I've looked at a lot of Bhakti poetry and Ritikalin poetry, because composers in the past have actually borrowed and extracted lines from existing Bhakti poetry and turned them into khayal compositions. So for example, one of the most famous compositions in Rag Bihagra, which says, Pyari Pag Hole Dhariye. This many of us sing, and it is actually a few lines extracted from a Bhakti Pad which is sung in Krishna temples. Or for example, there may be many people here who know the Bihag composition, Lat Ulji Surjhaja Balam Hathan Mehndi Lagi. That is a Savan Kapad, also sung as part of worship ritual in a lot of Krishnite temples. But I was also, thinking of how do you, is there a way of singing Bhakti poetry, and is there a way of singing something else? Does the literary content of the lyrics that you're working with, do they influence what form you choose to sing them in? And I was thinking, is Thumri more appropriate for a particular kind of poetry? And Dev's poetry.
That hadn't been done before.
No, of course, everybody has questioned. Lot of what I'm trying to do is not anything new, it's not rocket science. Each one of us has probably approached it in our own ways. But I get lucky because I get to articulate all of this with you. There are very few spaces where these discussions take place. So we come and we deliver the performance, and everybody says either wah or says bakwas tha, this is, or whatever, or I didn't like it. But these spaces are also very, very important ones, where, because writing on music very often, or articulating about music very often, becomes adjectival. So when you read about a performance, they say mellifluous voice or whatever, or that it was not up to mark this time or whatever.
People don't understand the background story.
So what you were trying to do is really perhaps left, in a sense, completely neglected. So no, a lot of people have looked at that. And Dev's poetry, which is 17th century poetry, there are many of this nature which are completely unabashed in the kind of experience they narrate. So he's talking about basically a woman, so Saj Singaran Sej Chadhi, Saj Singaran Sej Chadhi. So it's about a woman adorned for a night of lovemaking. And the narration is just completely, I mean, if I were to record this and put it on streaming platforms, let's say like iTunes or Spotify, where they try and do a translation, I'm pretty sure the explicit lyrics would be marked, because it talks about, you know, the choli coming undone, you know, much more actually, in candid, unabashed, beautiful language. So I think, you know, this really is a part, the sensuality is a part which sometimes we tend to neither celebrate ourselves as singers. First of all, we must be able to enjoy it. I mean, if I don't enjoy it, how am I going to present it before people? And then there is also sometimes, perhaps for reasons that, I mean, it's easy for me to say all this, but people in the past who were doing pioneering work may have had to face the social stigma attached to a lot of performers, and particularly women performers. Who knows, maybe they don't want to sing something that would say, you know, this is a bad girl who's singing today. So perhaps, you know, and those stigmas are not erased easily. We have perhaps not faced them in our generation, but people in the past have. So I think...
Do you think that might be a reason why classical singers don't, you know, imbibe too much of lyrics in their singing?
Possibly, I wouldn't be able to say that without pointing to examples. But for example, you know, one example I'd like to mention, that in the past, the Thumri singer was also a dancer and would stand and sing and dance. I mean, she obviously didn't weigh as much as I do, but that's another matter. But the fact was that the singer was also a dancer. And the fact that she was dancing in the public gaze, that she belonged to a particular community, to the Tawayef community, meant that a social stigma was attached. So she may have been greatly, greatly revered and respected as an artist, but perhaps socially she was not accepted. Now, if you notice that a little later, the entire singing of Thumri with dance has been separated. So no longer is Thumri an art which is also sung by the dancer. They have become, we've got separate Thumri specialists who are not dancing. Or for example, the idea of many of the great women professionals from the past suddenly taking to sitting on the floor, particularly in publicity campaigns, with a tanpura in hand, no longer standing, no longer wearing the kind of ornaments and dress that was part of a nautch party, let's say. So suddenly they become, you know, they have this tanpura, which there is a similarity to a goddess-like, a more sanitized image of the woman. There are no black and whites in this. There are many, many shades of gray. So please don't think that now that we are singing with a tanpura, all of us are trying to appear to be good girls. No. But yes, these were some of the things that happened in the past, and perhaps they stemmed from this deep-rooted stigma attached to the woman performer in the public gaze.
I wanted to ask you two connected things. One is Okay. That when you go through some tough times, how do you, I mean, how do you overcome that? In the sense through your music, or you take a little break?
To be honest, I sing and I'm with music every day.
Every day.
There is no, I mean, I may not sing if I have a sore throat, for example. How can I sing? But I'm still listening, I'm still learning, I'm still reading about music. And so I actually find comfort and companionship in music. And yet, not only in my music, I listen to the music
Other.
and the art of other people, and that inspires me, that moves me, that urges me to think. So yes, my companionship certainly comes from a lot of the arts, and many of those challenges are not overcome by listening to good music only. You have to accept that it's a challenge, it's not going to go away in a hurry, and you need to work at it.
You have to be at it.
Yes, you have to be at it, there's no way.
The other thing is that there's so many people, young people especially, who are taking to music, but only some come up. A lot of them actually sitting back depressed and in dismay. So your views on this? I mean, why? How?
Well, that's unfortunately been the case.
Today especially.
There are many artists who did not gain recognition in their youth, in their prime. Many of them gained recognition only when they were much older. And that happens in the world of music too. I really feel that in traditional music, which is what I have been studying, there is a big crisis. There is a big crisis of there being immensely talented young people, immensely talented. I would love to listen to them for years and years. They're that talented. But society is not giving them the right signals. And for that, I guess the only ones who will survive will then be people who either are able to hustle their way through, or people who are real artists, for whom it doesn't matter whether, it will be a tough time. They will go through tough times. And many of them may be deeply, deeply hurt by the kind of lack of appreciation. Unfortunately, such is the case. And all we can do is to be there as listeners, not just as pokat ke listeners. We have to pay for the music as well. So it's not enough for all of us to say, oh, I love your music, as long as you give it to me free on Instagram. But the moment I say, I made an album out of it and it just costs 40 rupees to stream it, sorry, finished. Then your stream comes for 0.32 rupees after 1 year. Then you know what's happening. So I think we have to, whether an artist is well known or not, the curiosity to know about that artist's work, go buy a ticket and listen to them, buy their recordings, and also express. I mean, why not? I mean, today communication is so easy. So why should I stand on my high horse and say, I am the senior artist, unless they bend backwards and bow down in front of me? Why should I say they are sounding good? I should listen to them, whether on Instagram or on Spotify, and say, I love this piece of music. Because I think that's really what is what makes an artist's day. When somebody unknown walks up to you and says, I heard your recording of this song and whatever, that's what really, suddenly the clouds really disperse and there's sunlight. So I think we need to be better, more committed listeners for all kinds of music. We are very fortunate people in India that we have such a diversity of music and arts. And so yes, of course, I love all kinds of music. I listen to popular music as well. I sing whenever I'm invited. But there's also a lot of other music which sadly is facing a crisis. And I think it would be nice if in this hugely populated country, where even the niche is very, very large, why can't we find that niche for those niche forms as well?
Absolutely.
The marketing and A&R people of record labels need to be nudged, maybe not just nudged, but asked to move.
Shubha ji, Earlier we were speaking about how sometimes many of us, as for example me as a poet, we go through something like writer's block. Do musicians like you or composers like you also have times where you need to take a pause, or where do you draw your inspiration in such moments, where you think you have something like a writer's block or a compositor's block, if that may be a term? Where do you go back to? Do you go back to nature? Do you go back to old poetry? Do you go back to old masters? What inspires you at times like that?
All of that happens, and very often, sadly, quite too often. When you listen, when you compose something, and sometimes you end up with this kind of nice little warm feeling, oh, this is sounding good. And then you hear a recording that, and you say, my goodness, did I make this? It's terrible. Or that I need to not sing it this way, I need to compose it again. I think it's very much a part of the process that each artist goes through. And although there is no formulaic way of saying that if you listen to good music, you will get past that block, I think you have to accept the block also and say, well, come in, spend some time of uninspired moments with yourself. And then, of course, listen to music, go out, hear the birds, or whatever gives you comfort. Sometimes I feel that you have to also go out and get angry and say, what on earth is happening in this place, and then do something. So I think it's really, I don't have a...
Does music come through you through anger sometimes?
Oh yes, absolutely, absolutely. It does. And I mean, it need not come through in, one of the people I learned from, for example, was Pandit Kumar Gandharv. And one of the compositions he made in Rag Shri was about being irritated with a young child. Now, Rag Shri is beautiful, it's majestic, it's also very asymmetrical. The intervals in that rag are very asymmetrical. But he made this composition which said, what on earth are you doing? Don't disturb me. Get out, you're disturbing me. Leave me in some peace. And I think masters, great masters who have broken the glass ceiling and left an example, what we can do is to listen to them, but maybe not try and be carbon copies, because therein lies the trap. So I think really we have to look for our own ways of getting past writer's block.
Can you hum a line of something that you've done very differently, maybe something that has come to you through anger, irritation, or something like that, something just hatke?
Well, my husband is also a composer, and we all love Faiz Saab. And Anish was saying to me, Anish is my husband, he's a musician and a scholar and a composer. And he said to me, people have sung Bol ke lab azad hain tere beautifully, but let's try and sing it in a different way. And he made this composition and asked me to sing it, and we recorded it with permission from Faiz Saab's family. It's not on any album or anything, but I'm going to keep my mic a little far away lest you people feel that your ears are getting blasted.
एक छोटी सी line.
बोल बोल के लब आजाद हैं तेरे, बोल ज़बां अब तक तेरी है, बोल 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 के लब आजाद हैं तेरे, बोल ज़बां अब तक तेरी है.
Wow. Bol ke lafz Azad hai tere by Faiz Ahmed Faiz. We couldn't have a better line to end this session with. We open the session for the audience to ask questions. If you have any questions, please raise your hands. The mic will reach you. Thank you.
Hello, Shubha ma'am.
Hi.
Namaskar. And I'm so happy today because Shubha ma'am, your album Pyar Ke Geet was the album which came out during my teenage or young age when and it is really nostalgic to always whenever I hear your song, and that especially that Dak Babu Layare Sandesa,
Yes.
that humming which you did was like, it's really
It's
beautiful.
interesting that you call it my album. I was only the voice in the album.
It was
The
beautiful.
album was actually Sandesh Chandeliers and several other people who wrote for that album. But it's interesting that you call it my album, and certainly it was my voice. But I'm very privileged to have worked with many people who gave me these wonderful songs to sing.
Actually, it's divine, and I'll say to be in your aura also. It's if you
You're
can
a very
hum-
generous lady.
No, ma'am. All the emotions are attached there. If you can hum those few lines.
Another time I'm having a little bit of a
Sure,
problem.
sure, please. Thank you.
Anyone else?
I've really enjoyed your rendition of the Thumri, and I wanted to ask you, is there a particular Thumri singer that has inspired you the most?
Yes, many Thumri singers, and those from whom I did not actually get the opportunity to learn. But for Thumri in particular, I would have to remember Siddheshwari Devi ji, because her rendering of Thumri, not only was it profoundly expressive, but in terms of the craft also, what she is able to do. Really, I mean, if anybody thought that Thumri is light music, they only have to put on a recording of Siddheshwari Devi ji to know that there's nothing light about it, that it is extremely expressive, profound, and very complex. So yes, I listen to Siddheshwari ji a lot. Of course, I listen to Begum Akhtar ji a lot.
Very good evening, ma'am, and it's a pleasure to be in your presence, and thank you so much for all the renditions. Question is, I remember, as one of the other ma'am said, ki growing up and the music, even though we don't understand the intricacies of Hindustani, but your voice was the biggest puller for listening to you at that time, and we chased concerts, and I remember Swaratma ke saath you had a collaboration, and
Yes.
I remember in those times, a lot of our batchmates, we came to see you and Swaratma, and so the likes of it, did you pursue that kind of combination which could bring the youngsters closer to music and then take it to the next level of the kind of genre that you represent, and like, you know, bring in a little bit more of people there to perform and hold on to the culture and the heritage?
You know, I've never really shied away from working with people who are, as you said, Swaratma, or whether it is Indian Ocean, or a lot of electronic musicians have also asked me to sing and collaborate with them, and I'm grateful for those opportunities. I never go out and do those things by saying, oh, this will get me a young audience. Because how can I take it for granted that all young people in the audience have a single kind of taste? There may be people young, very young, who may have different tastes, even in popular music. So I can never really predict what is going to reach which age group of listeners. I don't have that ability. I don't believe in it also, you know, and perhaps maybe I don't have it, that's why I don't believe in it. But I just feel that I have to make the music approach a collaboration of that nature with a certain sense of comfort. If I feel I cannot be myself in that, then I don't want to do it. And if I feel I cannot speak freely with my collaborators, and I agree to singing in a particular way because I'm being asked to, I don't feel I'm comfortable with that sort of thing. So I really cherish each of these opportunities, and I learn a lot from them. I enjoy them, but I'm not really so, I mean, of course, if it hits 1 million views in the first 1 hour of release, that's great. But I'm not the one who's handling that. I mean, I'll just sit back and grin and look at it on the laptop and say, wow, so many people have listened. But really, for the collaboration, I need to be very comfortable with them. and be able to say, I can do this, I can't do this. I don't want to do that just because it will get me more young audiences, etc.
Ma'am, it's been such a pleasure and a privilege to sit here, you know, right in front of you and listen to you. I mean, I just can't believe it.
It's very sweet
and
of
I
you.
think, you know, my siblings and my friends would really envy me, you know. I mean, if I go and tell them that, you know, I saw Shubha Mudgal, I think they
Do tell them.
Yeah, I will definitely tell them. And, you know, it was a pleasure to listen to these short snippets from you. And, ma'am, I must tell you that you speak as well as you sing. So,
Absolutely. On that note, we'll call it a day. It's 8:15 and the session ends here. I think on behalf of everybody, we can just say to Shubhaji, thank you for the music.
Thank you for all the questions and for conducting this so beautifully. Thank you.
A big round of applause for Shubhaji, please. Thank you, Bengaluru, for coming up on a Saturday evening. We have Javed Akhtar in the audience. Thank you, Javed ji.